In tonight's news edition, His Majesty holds talks in Washington with U.S. congressional leaders on Middle East issues and U.S.-Jordanian ties. Violence erupts during eviction of Israeli settlers from a West Bank outpost as Israel announces new construction. And the next round of peace talks on Syria are scheduled on February 20th as fighting continues near Damascus. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. On the third day of a working visit to the United States, His Majesty the King held separate meetings in Washington, D.C. with leaders and members of the U.S. Congress. High on the talks were the latest developments in the Middle East, the fight against terrorism, and Jordan's strategic relations with the U.S. We get more in this report.
The peace process, the Syrian crisis, and the situation in Iraq figured high on His Majesty's meetings with leaders and members of the U.S. Congress. The King met with Senate leaders and the heads and members of the Senate Appropriations Committee and its Armed Services Committee. His Majesty also held talks with the chairpersons and members of the U.S. House of Representatives Foreign Affairs and Armed Service Committees, in addition to its Subcommittee on State, Foreign Operations and related programs. King Abdullah reiterated that moving the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem will have regional consequences that will undermine the opportunities for peace and the two-state solution and weaken the chances of success in the war against terrorism. Relocating the embassy, the King warned, will increase the anger and despair among Arabs and Muslims and enable extremists to further spread their dark ideologies and agendas. There is no alternative to the two-state solution, which guarantees justice, freedom, and stability, His Majesty stressed. He also called for avoiding measures that may undermine opportunities to resume the peace process. The King also spoke of the need to sustain the ceasefire in Syria and fighting terrorism, which he said represents the ideal solution to protect Syrian people and ensure peace and security across the country. Talks also tackled ways and means to boost Jordanian-U.S. cooperation, as well as the renewal of the Memorandum of Understanding between the two countries for further 5-year period. King Abdullah praised the role of the U.S. government and Congress in providing economic and military assistance to the kingdom. The heads and members of committees expressed their appreciation of His Majesty's wisdom and policy on various regional and international challenges, as well as the kingdom's key role in efforts to bring about peace and stability in the Middle East.
Well, His Majesty is very well respected by the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee in both parties. You can see by the questions that were asked of him today that there is a very positive and good feeling between the United States and Jordan, and in large part it's because of the King, the enormous respect we all have for him, the fact he comes here, he speaks the truth, he speaks from the heart. He's a man of peace. When I get frustrated about all the things happening in the Middle East, and then I hear from the King, it's like a breath of fresh air just blew in. It makes me feel, yes, there are leaders in the Middle East that are forward-looking and can lead the region to peace, and he's that kind of person. So he's very well respected on both sides. And for me, I consider him a good friend, someone whose advice and counsel I have listened to through the years and really appreciated and respected what he had to say. I believe that the United States and Jordan will remain good friends. There's a lot of support from me and from others here for Jordan. We believe that Jordan is a good partner, a partner for peace, and the King, of course, is a large part of that.
Jordan is the peacekeeper of the region. It's that sort of relationship, but also there's such respect for Jordan. We talked about the number of refugees that the Jordanians have taken in. The support to Jordan from the United States is very important. He talked today about the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, that will be coming up in the next year, and we put our financial support to Jordan as one of the most important things we do from this subcommittee. It's very, very important. Jordan isn't just working for Jordan, it's working for the world and certainly for that region.
The talks, the first between Jordan and the new U.S. administration, mark a new era of relations. Hala Dababne for the News at 10.
The cabinet has decided to deduct 10% on the amount over 2,000 dinars of public sector employees' salaries. It also set a salary ceiling of 3,500 dinars for public sector staff members. The monthly deduction will go directly to the Treasury. The measure, which includes the salaries of the Prime Minister and ministers, is in line with the government's policy to cut spending. The measure, effective this month, includes senior staff at ministries and public entities, independent units, and government-owned companies, as well as public universities and municipalities. The Senate President warned against the repercussions of moving the U.S. Embassy in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Faisal Fayez said relocating the embassy would undermine chances to achieve a just and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. He urged the new U.S. administration to put pressure on Israel to return to the negotiating track and halt construction of settlements. Fayez also condemned a deadly attack at the Islamic Cultural Center in Quebec, Canada, and an attack by Houthi militia on a Saudi Arabian warship off the western coast of Yemen. He spoke at the start of a Senate debate of an amended public security bill attended by Prime Minister Hani al-Mulki. Israel gave the green light for the construction of 3,000 homes in Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. It was the third such announcement in 11 days since U.S. President Donald Trump took office. The government's approval came hours after a bill legalizing settler outposts passed a final vote in the Knesset. It came as hardline settlers scuffled with Israeli police, carrying out a court order to evict them from an illegal outpost in the occupied West Bank. Around 330 settlers live in Amona, the largest of scores of outposts built on land owned by Palestinians without official authorization. The Supreme Court ruled in November, after a lengthy legal battle, that settlers had to leave Amona. Chief Palestinian negotiator Sabi Riqat said the eviction and the announcement of plans to build more settlement homes in the West Bank was an act of political blindness.
Government balance is very awkward. They are evacuating 40 settlement homes in Amona and compensating the illegal settlers with 3,000 housing settlement units. This is political blindness. This is arrogance of powers. And as I said, the only venue to react to this is the International Criminal Court.
The next round of UN-based peace talks on Syria have been scheduled for February 20th. The talks had been planned to begin in Geneva on February 8th, but Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said last week that they had been postponed. The UN envoy for Syria, Staffan de Mistura, said he had decided to delay the UN-sponsored talks in order to take advantage of last week's negotiations between the Syrian government and opposition in Astana, Kazakhstan, hosted by Moscow, Ankara, and Tehran.
We want to give a chance both to the government to come seriously engaged in concessions and in discussions, and we want the opposition, because things are changing radically and rapidly, to actually be able to be given a chance to come with one unified opposition.
Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Felipe Grande, called upon the world to show solidarity with Syrian refugees and focus on the peace process. The UN Refugee Agency chief was visiting the Jibrin shelter on the outskirts of Aleppo after viewing the destruction and devastation caused by years of brutal civil war.
When you see this destruction, you really understand what being a refugee means and why it is so important to show solidarity and not rejection, to provide them with asylum when possible and not push them back across borders.
Meanwhile, fighting continued near Damascus despite a ceasefire. The Syrian army said it engaged in clashes with Daesh in the village of Ar-Rumman in the northern countryside of Damascus. The army said it took control of the village after they advanced from Al-Badia cement factory to the southeast. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights monitoring group said clashes resumed in the area near a military airport in the Damascus countryside. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said U.S. President Donald Trump should be more specific about his proposal to set up safe zones in Syria. He said attempts to implement a similar policy in Libya had been tragic. Lavrov spoke at a news conference in Abu Dhabi with United Arab Emirates Minister of Foreign Affairs Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Lavrov said he hoped Russia could discuss the issue with U.S. State Department once it had drawn up more detailed plans for the safe zones. But he did not think Trump was proposing to roll out safe zones in the same way as had been done in Libya in 2011. The UAE minister said the idea of safe zones in Syria would be welcome if they were to be temporary and for humanitarian purposes under international auspices. But he said Abu Dhabi wanted to hear more details from Washington before subscribing to the idea. U.S. President Donald Trump's executive order barring refugees from the United States and suspending travel from 7 Muslim-majority countries stirred protests around the globe and negative backlash from world leaders. The United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres said Trump's travel restrictions and freeze on refugee resettlement should be lifted sooner rather than later. Several lawsuits have been filed blocking the portion of the order, which drew harsh criticism from Democrats, human rights organizations, and some Western U.S. allies. Guterres emphasized the need for non-discriminatory border controls, warning that these types of measures risk triggering anxiety and anger.
Resettlement is a must from the point of view of refugee protection. And the United States has been always in the forefront of resettlement. And Syrians are those refugees that at the present moment have more dramatic needs in the world. So I strongly hope that the US will be able to re-establish its very solid refugee protection in resettlement, and I hope that the Syrians will not be excluded in that process. In relation to the measures that were taken, I already expressed my clear opinion about those measures. I think that those measures indeed violate our basic principles.
Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Theresa May, who has been under fire after her visit with Trump in Washington, said she was not given advance notice of his plan and that her government does not agree with the policy.
The government is clear that that policy is wrong. We wouldn't do it. In 6 years as Home Secretary, I never introduced such a policy. We believe it is divisive and wrong. If he's asking me whether I had advance notice of the ban on refugees, the answer is no. If he's asking me if I had advance notice that the executive order could affect British citizens, the answer is no.
Iran said it had tested a new missile, but this did not breach the nuclear accord with world powers or a UN Security Council resolution endorsing the pact. The latest test was the first during U.S. President Donald Trump's administration. Here's more.
Iran has confirmed that it tested a ballistic missile earlier this week. But the country's defence minister says that isn't a violation of the deal on Iran's nuclear programme. Tehran says it hasn't carried out any work on missiles designed to carry nuclear warheads and is thus in compliance with the deal. But the confirmation poses a challenge to new US President Donald Trump, who has vowed to stop Iran's missile programme. Now the standoff will feed into mounting tension over the US travel ban, which hits Iran and 6 other Muslim-majority countries. On Wednesday, Iran President Hassan Rouhani said the ban revealed Washington's true face.
They have said for many years that they are against Iran's government but behind its people. Now they proved that their statements, which they have been making for years, are utterly false. What they think in private and what they say in public are 2 different things. Now the unique character of the new president has removed the mask of hypocrisy, and he is showing what they have in their hearts.
Meanwhile, Washington says expect a tough response to the missile test. Whatever happens next, US-Iran relations again seem to be headed for crisis.
Members of the French Conservative Party defended their presidential candidate François Fillon, who faces pressure as a scandal over his wife's work engulfed his campaign. Fillon said he will stand down if he is put under formal investigation. He met members of his party as some of them consider a campaign without him. It was unclear how a new candidate could emerge with less than 3 months to go before the election. An opinion poll showed Fillon would not even make the second round of this spring's election in France amid rising support for far-right National Front leader Marine Le Pen and centrist Emmanuel Macron. Danny Van Poppel got his Herald Sun Tour off to the perfect start, winning the opening prologue stage in Melbourne. The Dutchman set the fastest time across the 2.1-kilometer stage of 2 minutes 32 seconds. The Team Sky rider clinched his first win of 2017 and his first prologue win since the 2014 Tour of Luxembourg. Van Poppel will now be wearing the leader's yellow jersey during tomorrow's Stage 1 race. The Russian club Zenit St. Petersburg have signed versatile Chelsea defender Branislav Ivanovic on a 2.5-year deal. Zenit said the Serbia captain, who played for Lokomotiv Moscow before joining current Premier League leaders Chelsea in 2008, had the option of extending his contract for another year. The 32-year-old won 2 Premier League titles and the Champions League with Chelsea in 2012. In 2013, he won the Europa League title for Chelsea with a stoppage time winning goal to beat Benfica in the final 2-1, giving the London club its second successive European title. Ivanovic was also voted man of the match for that victory. And finally, very cold tonight with moderate winds and frost formation expected in the highlands and desert regions after midnight. Tomorrow, more cold is expected across the kingdom, but relatively cold in the Jordan Valley and Dead Sea. Winds will be northwesterly moderate. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a cool day tomorrow with northerly moderate winds and choppy seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. To end the news, here's a reminder of our top stories. His Majesty holds talks in Washington with U.S. congressional leaders on Middle East issues and U.S.-Jordanian ties. Violence erupts during eviction of Israeli settlers from a West Bank outpost as Israel announces new construction. And the next round of peace talks on Syria are scheduled for February 20th as fights continue near Damascus. With that, we come to the end of tonight's news. I'm Nancy Khair. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.